Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. I hope that you've had a great and wonderful morning. I just realized that on one of my channels, I'm actually in the wrong space. So let me get off and let me hop on over to Black Table Talk, the Facebook page. So I will see you there. All right. And that's what happens. Cancel, share, and close all. All right, let me hop over to the right page. I know they're probably like, where's this lady? Where is she? Where is she? Hmm. Where's there we go. All right. There we go. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Hope everybody is doing well. I was in the wrong space this morning, so good morning to my Black Table Talk peoples. This is Daring Dialogues, Black Table Talk edition today, and I am your host, Shantae Charles. This is season 14, episode 56. There are 100 episodes per season, and today we're talking all things Black. Black people, Black politics, Black entertainment, Black news, just all things Black. We're also reading today from the book Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem by Bell Hooks, which we've been reading for quite a bit of time, but I feel like we haven't been moving through it quickly enough. Um, we're going to be looking at chapter 5 today, which I think is a really good chapter. The title is called Refusing to be a Victim. I started a couple of, I posted a couple of clips, and we've been talking a little bit on Black Table Talk about sundown towns. And somebody messaged me and they said, do you have any more of those stories about sundown towns? And I was like, yeah, I've got several of them. Um, but I'm just kind of, some of them I just started putting out for the first time ever publicly. A lot of my friends who are close to me have heard me talk about some of these things before, but the two that I shared were two that I shared for the first time publicly to a wider audience. Because sometimes telling what happened to you can be very triggering. It can take you back into that state, into that mind going on. So I noticed a lot of people were commenting, why are you laughing, or why are you nervously laughing, when you're telling what happened. That's because I could laugh about some of the stuff now, but in the moment and when it was happening, I could not laugh about it. Um, so sometimes looking back on it, you think to yourself how comical some things are, or how nonsensical some people's behavior is towards people of color and black people. So yeah, that was my reasoning behind the response. So, in that vein, I'll start off by telling you one of my other stories. Now, I don't know if I haven't checked the registry to see the makings in the markers. Number one, it had several lynchings in this town. Number two, the town is still to this day a what we call a super minority town, meaning that um, only 7%, and I see I have to do some adjusting to my settings, so give me a moment. Only 7% of the population there is people of color. It's like 93% white. This community that I used to live in, and that 7% is including black people. So it's not 7% of black people in the area. It's including everybody of color is included in that 7%. And so being in a town, being in a small town, um, and having a really small percentage of black people or persons of color in the town does make you stand out and make you more noticeable, than if you were living in, an urban space or urban city. But I say that to say, when we were living there, my husband and I, and just going into telling you about this particular scenario and what happened. So when we were living there, we were trying to establish our residency and all of that, and we had gone to the local postal service to get a box. Now this wasn't United States Postal Service. This was another one because again, this area is quite rural, and so it was the only one near us. And so we went in to get a box, and we got a box and set up our post office box and stuff. And maybe I don't know, probably about a year into renting our post box from them. Um, when I came in to get my mail, the manager came up to me and she said, um, "My staff doesn't feel comfortable with your husband coming into this space." And she said, "Well, um, my staff member says that your husband said something to her and she did not feel comfortable and she did not feel safe." And then she explained what it was that was said. And I said, and she described the person. I said, "Well, that's not my husband. Um, I know that there are few black people in this town, but the person that you're describing is not my husband at all." And so my husband came in, and the girl was like, "Oh yeah, that's him. That's him." And I'm like, "What? What is she even saying?" But as a result of that conversation, the way she described the person and my husband, they did not look alike. But in her mind, she had decided a black man had said something to her that made her uncomfortable. And again, like I said, this was like the only, if you've ever lived in a really, really rural place, you know that sometimes you have to get along with people, in order to do what you need to do in order to take care of your family or whatever. And this was one of those situations. Like we didn't have another box that we could go to set up, and we had already been there for a year. And so she said to me, she said, "Listen, I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on, but your husband cannot come in my facility anymore because my employee feels uncomfortable." And so I had a talk with my husband. I said, "Look, um, we pretty much know what this is and why it is. And I don't know why, again, the young girl felt threatened by my husband. He is a big guy, but he's pretty jovial, very kind. And I said, we know what this is. So here's what we're going to do. You don't go in there at all, and I will do the mail runs, and I will make sure that we get our things and um, take care of it that way. And for a whole year, hear me, for a whole year, he could not go in that store for a whole year until the manager realized the person was not talking about my husband. He couldn't go in the store for a whole year. And so when you have a situation like that, or you're living in a space where you are in the super minority, you have to do what you need to do in order to get through that place or get through that process. So a lot of times, some of the advice that is being given to people when we're talking about um, racism, race relations, um, race issues, when you live in a when you're in a super minority in a space or in a town, and you don't have a lot of funds, which we didn't at the time, to uproot your life and move your life somewhere else, there are things you have to do in order to survive the moment so that you can continue on and live on. Thank God we don't live there anymore. And the manager, the owner, eventually did apologize for what happened. But the reality was, it did happen. The reality was, um, we were sort of economically embargoed in a way, and definitely physically limited in space because of an accusation from an envelopian. That's what we call them here sometimes. Okay. This woman, she described someone who did not look like my husband. She said she felt threatened and uncomfortable. And therefore, because of that, he could not go in that space for a year. And I had to do all of the gathering of our mail, dropping off, picking up, delivery, etc., for a whole year because somebody said that my husband did something to them that he never did. And it was not even him. But unfortunately, we live in a world where we have people that think that all black men look alike or all black people look alike. And so those are some of the consequences of living in spaces where people hold that mindset, or that people hold the mindset that because you're black, you know, you're suspect. I think one minister said, you know, my my body or my skin color is the weapon in some people's mindset and eyes. And so that was something that, even though she later apologized, I never forgot, because who forgets their spouse being denied entry to a space for a whole year because somebody feels threatened by something they didn't do. Again, black women in this country have experiences that some of you all will never have. Point blank, period. And sometimes black women have to be the front facing for their own relationships sometimes to keep their spouse or their significant other from being maligned. That's the other part that a lot of black women don't talk about. That's why I'm talking about mine today. So I'm going to say it one more time. In order to make sure that this person was not going to continue a false accusation against my spouse, claiming that he said something to her that he did not say because he didn't look anything like the person she was describing. I had to come to an agreement with the owner that he would not enter the space and that I would enter the space only in order to continue business. And that was in a super minority space. And when I say super minority, that means that the population of a city or a town is 90%, 93%, 96%, 97% white. And I've lived in a town like that. And if you've never lived in a town like that, just pray you don't have to. But I have lived in a town like that. And you do have to navigate a little bit differently than if you were living in an urban metropolis space where you have other options. You have other options to go get mail. You have other options to go get food. You have other options to go repair your vehicle. When you're living in those kinds of cities and spaces, your options are limited. Your options are limited. So you have to think smarter and not harder. All right. So that's my latest sundown town experience um, that I wanted to share. All right. I want to talk a little bit about some of the. I got into a conversation for a couple of days now about writing and film and actors. There is a movie out or a television series out called The Madness, starring Coleman Domingo. And I started watching it because people were saying it's good, it's really good, you should see it. I think it's good. I couldn't figure out the storyline, but it has me captivated. It is number one right now. It is number one right now. But I'm not captivated. Um, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that I am a writer myself and an editor and a publisher, and I help people with screenwriting and script writing. I work on the editing side. And so a lot of times when I look at movies, I tend to look at the bigger picture. I tend to look at the construction of the story. And right now, I have finished episode 1 and 2 of The Madness, and I am not sold. I am not sold on the story. I am not sold on the characters. Um, I am sold on Philly though. They do get some things right, I think, about Philly, but the way that they are having this character act and behave does not feel authentic and it does not feel genuine. And so, because of those things, I'm having a really hard time um, finishing the series and believing that this character is performing the actions that he's performing. Um, and because of that, because I said this character doesn't feel authentic, I asked myself, who is in the writer's room? So then I went to look up who was the writer for this particular film, and it turns out it is a white male. And I was like, well, that kind of makes sense because the um, the script is not giving real. It's not giving authentic. It's not giving. If you were a black man being framed or set up for the unaliving of a mainline or well-known white supremacist leader or writer, if you were being framed for that, how would you respond? So the script does not feel natural. It doesn't feel like this person is responding culturally, even in a way that makes sense. So when I saw who the writer was, I said, okay, all right. So this is his version of what he thinks black people would do in this situation. So now I can go back with that knowledge and with that information and realize, okay, as I watch this, I'm watching a white male's perspective of what they think black men are like in this character. And so hopefully that's going to help me get through the next few episodes. I'm going to come back after I watch episode 3 and 4. I'll put some more on my page, but if you want to tag into that conversation, it is in on my page, and people are, you know, we're conversing on the page about it. So I will come back to that same um, post, and I will continue to talk there about episodes 3 and 4. All right, now that I have talked about this movie, I'm definitely not saying don't watch it because we want to support when black actors are leading. So if you want to watch it, join us in the conversation. Tell me what you think. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Tell me what you think about the series. Come and join us in that conversation. And I will meet you down in the weeds, as I say. I will meet you down in the comments and we will chop it up just a bit. But I will definitely say, knowing who um, is in the writing rooms matter. Culturally competent writers matter. Um, as a writer myself, I've had to go and study regions and climates and cultures and people and history before I start to craft a character for my writing. Why? Because I don't want to be writing about something and people who are from that culture say, this isn't true, or that's not there, that's not native to that. Um, and so I think that's a part of the research that should be done, or hire some black writers. I don't know, but I was really questioning um, if the writer had any black friends, because at least if you have black friends, you could say, "Hey, I'm working on this script. Um, would you mind taking a look at it, skimming over it? Giving me some feedback about the characters." Because one thing I know, one thing's for certain, and two things for sure: if black people are in trouble, chances are they're not about to go and involve their entire extended family in trouble with the law. Most of us are not going to probably go to auntie's house, grandma's house, sister in law's house um, if we're in trouble with the law. We're just not, or if somebody is chasing us and threatening our lives, most of us are not going to involve our loved ones in it because we don't want to see our loved ones hurt. So I wouldn't go to the people whose homes I love the most and that I have close relationship with and try to hide out there if somebody is following me or if somebody is trying to threaten me. I wouldn't do that. But this character, he's like I said, um, he's doing some very questionable things. So I'll let you decide. Going into our reading for today, we're reading Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem. We're just starting chapter 5, which is Refusing to be a Victim. This book is written by Bell Hooks. And I do want to give a caveat that this book was written, the first printing of it was 2003. And I find it to be interesting because a lot of the things she's talking about with Black people, with our self-esteem, um, we're still finding some of these things to be true even today. And so I feel like this is a timely writing. It's a prophetic writing in a lot of ways. And we can definitely learn a lot from the wisdom and the teachings that Bell Hooks left us. Chapter 5, Refusing to be a Victim. No Black person in the United States can have any measure of self-esteem if he or she has not cultivated the capacity to be a critical thinker, to live consciously. Used politically in relationship to governments, the term decolonize means to allow to become self-governing or independent. To allow to become self-governing, or independent. In a personal sense, decolonizing the mind means letting go of patterns of thought and behavior that prevent us from being self-determining. Since our society is structured around the principles of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, it is structured in such a way to impede the construction of emotional well being for the vast majority of citizens. However, the democratic policies of our nation make it possible for everyone to resist the socialization of the thoughts, values, and actions that perpetuate imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy if they are able to learn critical thinking. Now, this is very important because she writes this in 2003 and she makes a point of saying the democratic policies of our nation make it possible for us to resist being socialized. Good morning, doctor. To resist being socialized into an imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. This thought right here, in 2003, she was able to say that, hey, we have enough democratic policies in the United States to resist being socialized into imperialistic, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. Here we are in 2024 with some of those democratic policies already being stripped. And unfortunately more to come in 2025. Those policies that made it possible for everyone to resist being socialized into madness. Some of those policies are already being uprooted. Some of our history is already being removed from schools, libraries, right? Some organizations and institutions are facing defunding. Some schools are already being reprimanded and penalized because these democratic policies are being eroded right now. But when she wrote this, it was very clear to her that the policies we have in place help us to resist. And now we have those policies being dismantled. Why? Because, as she said, it's about socializing you into an imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal system. You can still resist, it's just going to make it hard to resist. And we already know that because we're seeing companies right now participate in, I forget what they call it specifically, but it's like an unasked for obedience or obedience in advance, right? The policies haven't even yet fully rolled out, and people are already ready to obey in advance. I am reading from Rock My Soul, Black People in Self-Esteem by Bell Hooks. Powerful reading. So this chapter 5 is all about refusing to be a victim of this system. All right? Born into a culture of domination wherein everyone is socialized to varying degrees to hate and fear Blackness, Black people can create positive self-esteem only by resisting this way of thinking. Mhm. Everybody has been socialized in varying degrees to either hate or to fear Blackness, and that includes Black people. So when I see Black people doing anti-Black things, many times I'm not surprised because we're all swimming in at least some form or some level or have had some level of exposure to anti-Blackness, whether that be television, whether that be media, whether that be people's attitudes in your family about Blackness. Some of us have had to work through personal, interpersonal people's feelings that we grew up with about Blackness that were anti-Black. So It's not like you're over here and you don't experience anybody saying anything terrible about blackness or black people or black history. And these people do know we're all at some level being impacted by anti blackness or fear of blackness. I just gave you my example of when I lived in a super minority town, the fear of blackness being put upon and being seen as a threat caused my husband and I to have to do things differently for an entire year because one person said, I feel threatened and I don't feel comfortable. And that was just that one experience. We had more than that, but that's one I just chose to share today. All right. So, what do you do when everyone is socialized to varying degrees to hate and fear blackness? You have to intentionally resist buying into this idea that blackness means wrong. You have to intentionally change your framework and change your mindset. Here's one. Some people will fight you about this one though. Why are you home? While you're home for the holidays, this is going to be a challenge. While you're home for the holidays, I want you to take a look around, and when you're visiting your family members, I want you to take a look around and see if there are any pictures on the wall of a white Jesus. While you during the holidays, I know people are gonna be going, they're gonna be traveling. When you go to Mima's house and grandma's house and mama's house, I want you to take a look and see if there are any pictures of white Jesus on the walls. You can report back to this post too and tell me. All right. Then, if you see one, I want you to attempt to move that picture. Somebody say you're setting me up for failure. I want you to attempt to move that picture and see what happens. And then, if you get pushback, I want you to ask them, why do they have up an image that doesn't reflect what the Bible describes? That's just a simple test. Because one of the ways we resist a certain way of thinking is we've got to start retraining our minds, retraining our thoughts. And also, a part of retraining your minds is retraining what you see visually. Okay? What are you looking at visually? What are you looking at constantly? I got one more section here I want to read, and then I'm going to stop for today. This resistance takes the form of critical consciousness. In Six Pillars of Self Esteem, Nathaniel Branden identifies consciousness as, quote, the basic tool of survival, the ability to be aware of the environment in some form, at some level, and to guide your action accordingly. Consciousness is the ability to be aware, to have, quote, the option of exercising your powers or of subverting our means of survival and well being. Critical consciousness is a process by which we reflect from that interrogative standpoint on our awareness of reality. For example, most Black people are conscious that we live in a racist and white supremacist society. This is a basic state of awareness almost all Black people hold. Critical consciousness is at work when we are able to utilize our knowledge of this reality in ways that circumvent exploitation and oppression of ourselves and others. So, again, it's not enough to just know. The question now is, what will we do with what we know? What will we do with what we know? We know that some of these things Many people warned and said, hey, if this person gets in, they're going to use Project 2025. I have said on this platform before, I was invited in 2015 to some conservative meetings in conservative circles. I saw in those meetings that were led by legal teams, okay, I saw what they were crafting and what they were getting ready to put out. I went to the people that I knew and I said, hey, this is what's coming down the pipeline. They're going to attempt to strip people's rights. You might want to prepare for this. Many of those people did not believe what I was telling them because, again, this was at the very, very, very first steps of it. These were the backroom conversations. They were not putting out anything publicly. So when I said it, I warned, it was not listened to. Just to be honest, it was just not listened to. Um, because again, it was at its initial states. There was no statements being made. There was no 900-page document. These were just people in the room having the conversation with lawyers about what they could do, what would be legal, and what wouldn't be legal. So they had a council on these things. Um, and so it moved from that to the first thing that they were going to do, and that was to stack the courts. So I warned people, hey, they're planning on stacking the courts. They want to make sure they have enough Supreme Court judges so that they can overturn Roe v. Wade. When all those judges were starting to be confirmed and they were asked the question in regards to Roe v. Wade, oh, they all testified. You can go back and look at their record. They all testified in their hearings, oh, we don't plan to do anything with that. That's, kind of set in stone. And then what did they do? As soon as they got in, they made it a point of overturning Roe v. Wade. That was just one of the things that they were planning to do, that they did accomplish. And so again, when they were saying during this last campaign rounds, and they were saying, oh, we have no connection to Project 2025. We don't know anything about it. It's not in any way connected. We knew they were lying. I knew personally they were lying, but we knew they were lying. Now that they've crossed the finish line, supposedly, because we know the Electoral College votes this month, later this month, now that they've crossed that finish line, now they want to spring out and tell you, oh yeah, by the way, we are using Project 2025. We are using the database of people who are quote unquote loyalists to the incoming administration. We are taking our picks from that database. It was their intention all along. And so now we have to work on ways to circumvent racist exploitation and oppression of people. So, as the writer said here, it's not enough to be conscious. We've got to be critical conscious thinkers, and we have to work together on ways to circumvent this oppression that people want to put out and put forth. All right. I want to thank you for your time and attention today. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, Black Table Talk Edition. And I want you to remember that light is always the most daring opposition to darkness. So your responsibility is to go out and be light. Take care. We are still on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on our YouTube channel. You can check us out there, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at our YouTube page, Life Nation KC. And if not, I will see you live again next week. Take care, be well, and most importantly, be light.